Yeah, we'll be doing Cincinnati. So first I'll talk a little bit about their head coach, and then I'll talk some about the roster, and then I'll go through their schedule game by game and give you a predicted winner and loser for each game. So head coach Scott Satterfield enters his second season as Cincinnati's head coach and his 12th season as a head coach. He was the head coach at two other places before Cincinnati, Appalachian State and then Louisville. His overall record as a head coach is at 79 and 57. So he was at Appalachian State for 6 years, where he had some success there, getting them three 10 plus win seasons, going 51 and 24 there. And then he didn't do very well at Louisville. He was there 4 years and only finished at 25 and 24. And then at Cincinnati, his first year, he was terrible. They only went at 3-9. I don't think that he's a very good head coach. So recruiting in Cincinnati's first year in the Power Five, which was 2023, was really bad. They only had the 75th ranked recruiting class, but in 2024 it did improve quite a bit to the 51st ranked recruiting class, which is still not very good, but that is a good sign that they had such an improvement. So starting on the offensive side of the roster at quarterback, so they bring in a transfer quarterback who will be the starter. He comes from Indiana, and to be honest, he's a terrible quarterback. His name is Brendan Sorsby. So last year he started 7 games and played in 10 games, and only had 1,587 passing yards, and he threw 15 touchdown passes. But his completion percentage was only 57.2%, and his yard per throw average was bad at only 6.7. So at wide receiver and running back, though, they look pretty good. So at wide receiver, they return Xavier Henderson, who was their top receiver last year, and he's good. He had last year 58 catches for 782 and 3 touchdowns in 11 games. Averaging 13.5 a catch. And they bring in two transfer wide receivers that will be the other two starters, most likely. They bring in Tyron Smith from UTEP, who only played in 4 games in 2023, but in 2022 had 1,039 yards on 71 catches and 7 touchdowns, averaging 14.6 a catch. And they bring in from FAU Tony Johnson, who had last year 411 yards on 37 catches and 4 touchdowns, averaging 11.1 a catch. And at running back, they return Corey Kenner, who is a good running back. He had last season 1,047 yards and 5 touchdowns on 192 carries, averaging 5.5 a carry, and had 6 games of over 100 rushing yards. And they bring in a transfer running back who does come from the FCS, but he had in 11 games last year 890 yards on 148 carries and 6 touchdowns, averaging 6 yards a carry. His name is Chance Williams, and he had 106 rushing yards last year against LSU. So on the offensive line, they do look good here too. They return all 5 starters, including All-American right guard Luke Pandra, who only allowed 2 sacks last season. He's going to play in the NFL, no doubt. So other than the quarterback, their offense looks pretty good. But if their quarterback struggles, their offense probably is not going to be very good. So moving on to the defensive side, their front seven looks terrible overall, and their secondary looks decent. But if their front seven of their defense struggles, their defense is going to struggle. They're going to give up a lot of points. So on the defensive line, they do return Dante uh, Corlin, who is a good player. He had last season 39 tackles and 3 sacks and 5 total pressures, and a forced fumble and a pass breakup. But other than him, they don't have any good defensive linemen. And at linebacker, they've got Jake Dingle uh, coming back, who's a pretty good player. He had last season 53 tackles and a sack and three total pressures and two fumble recoveries and a pass breakup. But they're not going to have much of a pass rush and they're not going to be good at stopping the run. So in the secondary, the safety position looks pretty good. This is probably the biggest strength of the defense. So they have three transfers coming in at safety. They've got Logan Wilson from North Texas, who had last year 61 tackles and two fumble recoveries and an interception and three pass breakups. And they've got Mecky Miller from New Mexico State, who had last year 59 tackles and uh, two interceptions, one for a touchdown and four pass breakups. And they bring in a transfer safety from Ohio State. Keith Stokes is his name. He's a four-star recruit. And he hasn't though started any games in college, but he should help them out. And then at cornerback, they have one starting corner out of the two returning, but he's not very good. And the other starting corner will be a transfer, Derek Canton from Virginia Tech, who is a pretty good player. He only started 3 games last year, but played in every game and had 43 tackles and five pass breakups and an interception and a forced fumble. So, on special teams, they are in decent shape here. Both the kicker and punter returning. Their punter, Mason Fletcher, is one of the Big 12's best punters. He averaged at 43 yards per punt last season. So I'm a little bit higher on Cincinnati than most are. I think they're going to win more than 2 or 3 games, but I still think that they're going to be a bad team. So now moving on to the predictions, they start the year against Towson. This will be an easy win. And then they play Pittsburgh at home. Pitt is going to be so awful. I think Cincinnati's better, and especially playing at home should get this win. But it probably will be a pretty close game. Then they play on the road at Miami, Ohio, a very losable game for Cincinnati. And Miami, Ohio might even be favored in this game because it's on the road. But I think Cincinnati has enough on offense to get the win in a close one. So then they play Houston in their first conference game of the season at home. So Houston, I think now is going to be one of the worst teams in the Big 12 this year. Their roster is just not very good. They're going to struggle on both sides of the ball. I think Cincinnati's better and will get a close win. So then they play Texas Tech on the road, a team that I don't think is going to be great, but I think is going to be pretty solid on both sides of the ball this year. And Cincinnati is going to have a lot of struggles on defense. I think, even though their offense may be okay. So I think that makes the difference, and Texas Tech gets the win. Mm. So then they take a week off and play on the road at Central Florida. I think this will be another loss. So I do like Cincinnati's offensive line better than Central Florida's, but I like the transfer quarterback KJ Jefferson that Central Florida brought in better than I do the transfer that Cincinnati brought in at quarterback. And KJ Jefferson will have plenty of good playmakers around him on offense, and Central Florida is also going to have a solid defense. So I think this one will be a loss for Cincinnati by a couple of scores, probably. And then they play Arizona State at home. So I know Cincinnati is supposed to be the worst team in the Big 12 this year, but I actually think that's Arizona State. Their roster is horrible. I think Cincinnati beats them, but it probably will be a pretty close game because Cincinnati is not a whole lot better. And then on the road at Colorado, and I wasn't forgetting about Colorado when I said that Arizona State, I think, is the worst team in the Big 12. I think they're even worse than Colorado is. And with this game being at Colorado, I have a feeling that Colorado is going to get this win over Cincinnati in a close one. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Cincinnati beat Colorado. I wouldn't be surprised if anybody beat Colorado. They're so horrible. And then they play West Virginia at home after they get a week off. So this is a bad matchup for Cincinnati because West Virginia is a running team and a very good running team. They won't be able to stop the West Virginia run game. West Virginia will score a whole lot of points on them, and West Virginia also has a solid defense to where Cincinnati won't be able to keep up. I think this will be a blowout loss for Cincinnati. And then they play on the road at Iowa State. I don't see Cincinnati going on the road to Iowa State, which is a tough place to play, and beating the really experienced team that they have this year. That's a very solid team. I think Iowa State will win this one by a couple of scores. And then they play on the road at Kansas State. Like West Virginia, they're a really good running team. It's a bad matchup for Cincinnati. They'll score a whole lot of points on Cincinnati. And Kansas State's going to have, I think, a good defense this year. So Cincinnati, I don't think will score that much in this game, and it'll be a blowout loss. And then they end the season against TCU at home. So offensively, Cincinnati may be able to match up fairly well with TCU, but defensively, I don't think they do. TCU has got more talent. I think they get this win, but it could be pretty close. So my final prediction for Cincinnati is 5-7 overall and 2-7 in the conference. So even though I've only got them one win away from a bowl game, I think it's pretty unlikely that Cincinnati goes to a bowl game because even though they could easily beat Colorado and that would have put them at 6 wins if I'd have picked them to, they could lose at 4 out of the 5 games that I picked them to win. So probably if they beat Colorado, they'll lose to one of those teams that I picked them to beat. But that will be it with this video. Please subscribe and thanks for watching. I'll be back soon, and tomorrow I'll be filming my top 25 final.